Okay, so you've soldered a couple tracks together. You may be wondering, how do I connect them together for my big picture track, for my actual design? So I'm going to show you. So you should have two pieces of soldered track like this. You're going to get a piece of aluminum foil. You're going to get a couple jigs like so. You need goggles. You need a heat gun. And you're going to need a couple pieces of heat shrink tubing, which you can get from me or Mr. Schulman. You also need some scissors in this case. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put my aluminum foil on the table. It's a little safer with the heat gun because it doesn't produce direct fire, but just to be safe, we're going to use aluminum foil. I'm going to get a couple of these jigs, and I'm going to put one of my straight tracks in each of the jigs, facing each other. Okay. Next, I'm going to take my heat shrink tubing, like so, and I'm going to cut it in half because we're going to actually use it in two sections. So both of them I'm going to cut in half. And I'm going to put two of each of them on one of the tracks so that it will look like this. Okay. Next, I'm going to slide the other, I might not be able to do this without the guidance of my hand, but I'm going to try to slide the other track, oh look at that, yeah, into the heat shrink tubing like this. And then I'm going to spread them out. I want one on each of the ends. And I forgot to mention, you want to make sure that your supports are facing down, because obviously the marble can't get past those. Those are the bottom of the track. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the same track has, on both sides of the track, the same side is on top. You want to keep kind of that unified, because again, the marble is going to drop down off of one track onto the next. And if you have one leg from each kind of mixed up, then it won't work very well. So I'm going to take my helping hand here, and I'm going to just grab the wires, grab the tracks so that they'll stay in the same spot. I want them to be nice and snug together, but I want them to be one on top of the other. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, my heat shrink tubing should be kind of hanging over the edge of the bottom track, so that, because you want it to help kind of fuse the connection between the two, so you want it to be like halfway over one edge and halfway over the other. I'll show you as soon as I get this done. Then I'm going to take my goggles, put them on, and I'm ready to turn on my heat gun. There's two settings here. There's kind of a low and a high, just like a blow dryer. I'm going to use the high setting. And you'll notice that like almost instantly, the tubing just kind of sucks together. That's the beginning. And you want to hit it from all angles. Do not put your hand in front of the heat gun because it's very, very hot. It could burn you. Although it's very quiet, it does produce a lot of heat, so you want to be careful. Okay, so I did one end. I'm going to do the same thing to the other end. So again, my heat shrink tube should be kind of half hanging over the edge so that it will help with the transition down. Pretty good. I also want to make sure that the same track is on top. I'm ready to go. Okay. Now, you want to be careful because this is just a temporary hold until I actually solder in the middle there. It will hold them together, but it's not the strongest in the world. So it looks like that. And you see this gap right here is where I'm going to solder. I'm going to do the same process, put some flux, and then just do some solder right in there. And then I have a really solid track right there. Okay, I went ahead and got my soldering supplies just so I could show you what it looks like to solder these together. Again, I need to make sure I have my mask, my goggles, my solder, my flux, my torch, my lighter. I'm going to take some flux, just kind of apply it, see if I can wedge it in there, in between the two tracks. You don't want too much flux, but see if I can get some in there. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. That will just help the bond. That will help this kind of guide the solder into where I want it to go. Okay. Now, when we're soldering, remember that the key is to put the heat where you want the solder to go, not directly on the solder. So I'm going to extend this about 6 inches. Put my mask on. So I'm going to approach from one side with the heat, from the other side with the solder. You don't want the flame to get too close to your heat shrink tubes because they will melt and you don't want that. So I'm going to go right in the middle. Heat on one side, solder on the other. There it goes. You can kind of just brush it on once it starts to melt. That's pretty good. I'll do the other side. Again, you don't want to get too close to your heat shrink tubes because they will melt. So I'm not getting closer than about 1 inch from them. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, I'm going to pick this up at the very ends because this is very hot in the middle, but you can kind of see the connection that I made in the middle. Now this is pretty darn strong. The combination of the heat shrink and solder makes a pretty good connection, so this will be usable on my track.